Episode 1, The First Whisper. I remember the sound of the church doors closing behind me that night. Heavy, wooden, ancient, and final. The air inside was thick with incense. Though no candles were lit, I came to cleanse myself, to pour out the secrets that had been rotting inside me. I thought confession would set me free. But freedom was not waiting for me in that booth. The small door creaked as I slid inside, the wooden lattice between me and the priest glowing faintly from the dim light beyond. I could not see his face, only the outline of a man hunched in shadow. His voice was low, gravelly, and oddly calm. "Speak, child." Those two words seemed to unlock something inside me. My throat trembled. I whispered my sins, one by one, petty lies, forbidden desires, things I had never dared tell another soul. The words poured out of me faster than I expected, as though the booth itself pulled them from my chest. I felt lighter, almost relieved. And then, silence. The priest did not give absolution. He did not murmur forgiveness. Instead, I heard the sound of breathing, slow, deliberate, as if savoring every secret I had spilled. "Your voice belongs here now." At first I thought I misheard. But when I tried to speak again, nothing came out. My lips moved, my lungs pushed, but no sound escaped. Panic surged. I slammed my hand against the wooden frame, but the shadow beyond did not flinch. "Leave," he said simply. "Return when you are ready to confess what you've hidden even from yourself." I stumbled out of the booth, clutching my throat. The church seemed darker now, walls pressing closer, the silence around me heavier than stone. I tried to scream, but only air escaped. No echo, no sound. My voice gone. And then I heard it. From inside the booth, faint but unmistakable, my own voice whispered the words I had confessed only moments before. It repeated them, line by line, in the same tone, the same desperation, as if the booth had swallowed my words and kept them alive. My chest tightened. It wasn't an echo. It was me. The last thing I remember before fleeing was hearing myself whisper something I had never said aloud. A sin buried so deep I wasn't sure if it was memory or prophecy. And the booth whispered it with my stolen voice. Episode 2, Echoes in the Dark. That night I told myself it had been a nightmare. Shock, a trick of the mind. Voices don't vanish, sins don't repeat themselves through wooden walls. And yet when the morning came, my throat was still barren, a hollow well that gave nothing back. I tried to call out for help, only silence. I tried to whisper my own name, nothing. My reflection in the mirror moved its lips, but no sound reached my ears. My voice wasn't missing, it had been stolen. By dusk, I found myself drawn back to the church. The same doors groaned open, the same shadows stretched across the pews like black fingers. The silence inside wasn't empty, it was heavy, expectant, as though the walls themselves remembered me. I walked toward the confessional. Every step felt wrong, like treading into my own grave. My hand trembled as I touched the wooden booth, and then I heard it. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." My own voice, whispering from within, the exact cadence, the same quiver, but it wasn't me. I stood outside, frozen, listening to myself confess in real time. The words came faster now, spilling secrets I had never spoken. Not just lies or doubts, but darker things, uglier things. Memories I had buried so deep I wanted to deny them. I wanted them gone. I prayed for their death. The voice cracked, broke, pleaded. It was my voice, but the sins belonged to someone else, or to a part of me I refused to acknowledge. I backed away, heart pounding, and that's when I felt the presence. Not footsteps, not breath, but something pressing against the air between the pews. A shape in the shadows, watching. I turned, and for a moment I saw the booth itself breathe. The wooden frame seemed to swell, exhale, like lungs filled with every stolen confession. And from the lattice, dozens of whispers bled out, not just mine. Male, female, young, old, layered voices, tangled prayers, all of them desperate. All of them trapped. I stumbled backward, choking on silence until one voice cut through the rest. Clear, sharp, my own. "You will return. You always return." The booth went still. The whispers ceased. And in that dead quiet, I realized something worse than losing my voice. The confessional hadn't only taken it. It was learning how to use it. Episode 3, The Priest Without Eyes. When I returned to the church the third night, I told myself it would be the last. I needed answers, even if they came wrapped in terror. Silence had followed me everywhere, clinging like a second skin. People looked at me strangely when I tried to speak, as if my muteness was contagious. But it was the whispers I feared most, the sound of my own voice echoing where it did not belong. The confessional booth stood waiting, patient as a predator. Its door gaped slightly open as though it had been expecting me. My chest tightened, but something stronger than fear pulled me inside. For the first time, the man beyond the lattice moved. He leaned closer, so near I could almost smell him. Dust, incense, and something coppery underneath. His breath rattled, strained, like it had traveled a long way just to reach me. I pressed my lips together. I had nothing left to confess. And then I saw it. The thin veil of light cut across his face, just enough to reveal skin pale as wax, stretched taut over hollow sockets. Where his eyes should have been, there was only darkness. I froze, my nails digging into the wood of the bench. The priest smiled faintly, as if he felt my terror bloom. His head tilted, listening to me without ears, seeing me without eyes. And when he spoke, his words seemed to slip past my skin and burrow straight into my thoughts. You believe you've confessed everything, but your silence tells me more than your words ever could. I wanted to scream, to deny, to demand who or what he was, but my voice was still gone, sealed away. All I could do was shake, trapped in his sightless gaze. The priest raised a hand and pressed it against the lattice. His fingers were thin, bony, trembling. The wood between us groaned, as though it wished it wasn't there. Do you feel it? Your sins cling to you still. You cannot wash them away with words, not when they are written deeper than your tongue. Then the whispers began again. My voice, a chorus of my voice, reciting sins that belonged to me and others that didn't. The booth quaked with them, hundreds layered into one. I pressed my palms over my ears, but it made no difference. The sound was inside my skull, clawing at the marrow of my bones. When I pulled my hands away, I saw his sockets again. For the first time, I realized they weren't empty at all. They shimmered faintly, filled with shifting shapes, mouths, tiny mouths, whispering prayers that weren't prayers at all. The priest leaned closer to the lattice until his lips nearly touched the wood. If you wish to be forgiven, bring me what is missing. Bring me another voice. The booth went still, his hollow eyes dimmed, and I fled, wordless, broken, but haunted by a new terror. The priest hadn't stolen my voice just to keep it. He wanted me to steal one for him. Episode 4, The Sin That Wasn't Mine. I thought the silence was punishment enough, walking through the world unable to call for help, unable to scream when the nightmares clawed their way into daylight. But the church was not finished with me. On the fourth night, I dreamed of the confessional again. The booth stood in the center of a burning sanctuary, the flames bowing around it, never touching its wood. From inside came my own voice, low and trembling. I woke in sweat, my throat aching, though no sound escaped me. By instinct, I returned to the church at dawn. The doors opened easily, as if I belonged there now. The air was cold, damp with stone, and I felt the walls listening. I stood before the booth but did not enter. I couldn't. My legs locked. Still, the whispers bled through the lattice, curling into the air like smoke. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. My body went rigid. It was my voice again, whispering through the cracks, but this time it confessed something I had never done. I slit her throat while she prayed. My chest tightened, nausea climbing my throat. The words were mine, but the memory they carried was not. I had never killed. I had never even dreamed of it. Yet as the whisper unraveled detail by detail, the cold knife, the gasp, the pooling blood, I saw it all in my mind's eye as though I had lived it. I smelled iron. I felt the blade heavy in my palm. No, I mouthed, shaking violently, though no sound came. My hands pressed against my ears, but the confession pierced through bone and blood. Then another whisper layered over mine, a child's voice, fragile, trembling. She deserved it. I stumbled back, slamming into a pew, breath ragged. There were two voices now, mine, and another that was not mine at all. But they wove together seamlessly, as if one sin required two tongues to carry it. The booth seemed to shiver with delight, the wood vibrating like a pulse. I saw movement beyond the lattice, shadows crawling, forming lips that weren't lips, grinning with every unspoken crime. Then came the priest's rasp, low, certain. "Do you see, child? Your silence leaves room for new confessions. The booth does not care who committed them. It only needs a mouth willing to speak." I wanted to run, but my legs betrayed me. A heaviness seeped into my bones, rooting me where I stood. I couldn't look away from the booth, couldn't unhear the murder it had written into my voice. And then, with finality, my own whisper delivered the last blow. And I would do it again. The booth fell silent. The church waited, as though daring me to deny it. But when I tried to speak, to shout the truth, nothing emerged. And in that moment I realized the horror. It didn't matter if I was innocent. The booth had already confessed for me. Episode 5, The Wall of Voices. By the 5th night, the silence inside me was no longer empty. It was crowded. When I lay in bed, I could feel other whispers stirring at the edges of my skull, voices that weren't mine, pushing against the walls of my mind like prisoners testing their chains. I told myself not to go back. I told myself the church was poison, the confessional a trap. But denial is fragile, and temptation is strong. Something about that booth called me, not with words, but with gravity, pulling me back through the doors I swore I'd never open again. The nave was colder than before. The stained glass windows seemed dim, their saints fading as though ashamed to watch. I stepped closer to the confessional, but this time I didn't enter. My hands brushed against the wall beside it, and froze. The wood was trembling. I leaned in, pressing my ear against the grain. At first, only silence. Then, like water seeping through cracks, the voices began. Hundreds of them. Men, women, children, layered one over the other, rising and falling in feverish waves. "Forgive me, Father. It wasn't my fault." I begged her to stop screaming. I buried him beneath the floor. Each confession scraped across my skull, jagged and raw. The wall throbbed beneath my skin, alive, as though it had veins running deeper than stone. I staggered back, but the voices didn't stop. They grew louder, spilling into the open air, filling the church until the silence was drowned. My throat ached to scream, but still nothing emerged. My silence was their feast. Then, a single voice broke through the chaos, clearer than the rest. "My own. I will bring another. I promise." I collapsed against the pew, shaking violently. I hadn't spoken those words. I hadn't made that promise. But the wall, no, the booth, had spoken for me, bending my voice into an oath I never gave. The wood creaked, and for a brief second I saw the outline of mouths pressing through the paneling, stretching the grain as if the wall itself was trying to speak. Lips without faces, teeth gnashing behind the veil of timber. I backed away, every instinct screaming to run, but the voices followed me, their rhythm steady, relentless. A chant: "Confess, confess, confess." I fled the church, the echoes clinging to me long after the doors slammed shut. But no matter how far I walked, I could still feel the wall breathing against my ear, whispering sins not yet spoken. And I knew then, it wasn't just my voice the booth was devouring. It was building a choir. Episode 6, The Voice I Loved. There are many kinds of silence. The silence of a room abandoned, the silence of a prayer left unanswered. And then, there is the silence that follows you like a shadow, an absence so heavy it begins to shape itself into something else. That was the silence I carried on the 6th night. I had not slept in days. Each time my eyes closed, the walls of the church pressed in, my stolen voice spilling sins I had never committed. But this night was different. This night, among the sea of whispers that haunted me, one voice cut deeper than all the rest. It was hers, soft, fragile. A voice I hadn't heard since the coffin closed and the earth swallowed her. My sister, dead 3 years now. And yet here she was, her tone clear, trembling, exactly as I remembered from the nights we prayed together as children. "Forgive me, Father." I hated the way she looked at me. I wished her gone. The blood in my veins turned to ice. My knees buckled. No, it couldn't be. The confessional couldn't have reached into the grave. But the words continued, pouring from the booth as though her spirit had been waiting there all along. I was glad when the sickness took her. I did not cry. Tears burned my eyes. It wasn't true. It couldn't be true. She had loved me. I remembered her hand clutching mine when she was too weak to rise from bed. I remembered the way she whispered blessings for me, even as her lungs drowned. And yet, it was her voice, The booth moaned softly, the lattice glowing faintly as if feeding on my agony. I pressed closer despite myself, desperate, needing more. "Do you hear me?" she whispered. "I never prayed for you. I prayed against you." The words cracked something inside me. My silence should have been my shield, but in that moment it became my prison. I tried to scream back at her, to deny, to beg, but nothing came. Only air, only panic. Then faintly the priest's rasp slid between us, oil on water. "Even the dead confess, child. Their voices live where yours cannot. Will you deny her truth?" I stumbled back from the booth, clutching my chest. My sister's voice still rang in my ears, each syllable a dagger. And the worst part was the seed it planted. What if she had hated me? What if death had only freed her to finally admit it? The confessional stood still, breathing quietly, waiting. I fled into the night, but no matter how far I went, her voice followed, sweet, sharp, venomous, and I understood the cruelest part of this curse. The booth wasn't just stealing voices. It was turning the ones I loved into weapons against me. Episode 7, The Prayer That Choked Me. There was a time when prayer was my refuge. Words whispered in the dark, words that made me feel less alone. But now even prayer had become a trap. On the 7th night, I knelt beside my bed, hands clasped tight, heart pounding like a drum, desperate to be heard. I wanted to pray, not for salvation, not even for forgiveness. I wanted to pray for silence, for the voices to stop. I shaped the first word silently on my lips, "Our," and then it struck. A sudden coil wrapped my throat, invisible but merciless, as though unseen hands had closed around my windpipe. My lungs spasmed, my chest heaved. I clawed at my neck, but nothing was there. Nothing but the crushing grip of something that hated the sound of prayer. The harder I tried to whisper holy words, the tighter it became. My body jerked forward, my nails carving lines into my own skin. And then I heard it. From the corner of the room, in the shadows where the candlelight didn't reach, my own voice spoke, clear, calm, uttering the prayer I could not finish. "Our Father who art in heaven." It was me, my tone, my breath, but not from my throat. The sound filled the room, patient, steady, flawless. And yet every syllable it recited forced the grip on my neck tighter until black spots bloomed in my vision. I collapsed, gasping soundlessly, as the prayer continued without me. "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." No, I hadn't asked for forgiveness. I hadn't even meant those words. But the prayer went on, perfect, mechanical, like a recording pulled from the marrow of my soul. I tried to crawl toward the candle, but a weight pressed me down, invisible and cold. The prayer grew louder, stronger. It filled the walls, the floor, even the air I tried to breathe. "Deliver us from evil." The last line was whispered directly into my ear, though no one was there. The cold breath brushed my skin, and for one terrible instant, I felt my lips move against my flesh. The grip vanished. My chest heaved and air tore back into my lungs like fire. I coughed, sobbing, my body trembling with the violence of survival. But when I tried to speak, to curse, to call, to plead, nothing came. My voice was still gone. Instead, from the darkness, the last echo of the prayer lingered, twisted into something unholy. "You don't need to pray anymore. We'll pray for you." And I realized then, I wasn't just voiceless. I was no longer the one who decided what my prayers would be. Episode 8, The Confession That Repeated Itself. By the 8th night, I no longer trusted silence. It had become an accomplice, a cloak for things that moved unseen. Every pause in the world was only a waiting mouth ready to open. Still, the church pulled me back. Not with warmth, not with promise, but with inevitability. Each time I swore I would never return. My feet betrayed me, dragging me down the crooked streets until the doors groaned open once more. The confessional loomed in the shadows like a beast that never slept. Its lattice glowed faintly, pulsing as if with breath. And before I could stop myself, I stepped inside. The darkness welcomed me. At first there was nothing. Then my voice, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." My chest tightened. Those were the first words I had spoken the night I lost my voice. The memory flooded me. Trembling lips, shame, relief. I pressed against the wood, desperate to hear what followed. And it came. I lied, I coveted, I doubted God. The same sins, the same rhythm, but then something new. I burned the letter before she could read it. I wanted her pain. My stomach dropped. That was not mine. That memory did not belong to me. Yet hearing it in my voice made it feel true, as if some hidden corner of my soul had carried it all along. The confession started again. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. The same cadence, the same trembling tone, but darker this time. I watched him drown and did not move. I wanted to see the bubbles stop. I slammed my fists against the wood, shaking my head violently. No, 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 that was not me, it wasn't. But the booth didn't care. The third time it began again, softer, slower, savoring each word. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I slit her throat while she prayed. My body shook with horror. I had heard those words before, whispered through the wall. Now they were mine, carved into me by repetition. The booth trembled around me, groaning like it held back 100 restless bodies. And through the lattice, I saw shapes pressing forward, faces molded from shadow, mouths moving in sync with my voice. Over and over, the confession repeated, each cycle adding another crime, another memory that wasn't mine but now lived inside me. I tried to run, but the door would not open. The booth breathed with me, tightening, pulling me deeper. And in that suffocating dark, I understood the horror. The more it repeated, the less I remembered what was truly mine. The sins were becoming me. And when the last whisper fell, it wasn't the priest who answered. It was my own voice, low and certain, sealing the truth. These are not lies. These are who you are. Episode 9. The Seal of Silence. When I woke on the 9th morning, I knew something had changed. My throat ached, not the ordinary dryness of restless nights, but a deep burn, as if words had tried to claw their way out in my sleep. I stumbled to the mirror, desperate for proof that I still belonged to myself. And there it was, a mark. Faint at first, then darker the longer I stared. A bruise shaped like a ring, just above my collarbone. Not a bruise, I realized, but something written into me. A circle, broken by a jagged line. A seal. The seal of silence. I tried to touch it, but my fingers recoiled. The skin was hot, pulsing with something alive beneath. Each throb echoed the voices that haunted me, as though the mark itself was their doorway. I ran cold water over it. Nothing. I pressed a crucifix against it, trembling. The metal hissed against my flesh, as though burned away by the contact. I fell to my knees, clutching at the chain, but the seal only darkened, shining faintly red. By dusk, I could feel it spreading, not outward but inward. Every time I tried to force a sound, the mark tightened, choking the attempt into stillborn silence. The booth had taken my voice once, but now it had branded me, claimed me. I stumbled back to the church. I didn't want to, but the seal guided me, tugging me through the streets like a leash. Inside, the air was heavy with dust, thick enough to taste. The pews seemed further apart, the shadows deeper, as if the building itself had shifted to welcome me back. I approached the confessional with trembling steps. Before I touched it, the priest's rasp slid through the lattice, low and hungry. "You wear it well, child. The mark suits you." I clawed at my throat, desperate to tear it away. But the priest chuckled, a sound that rattled through the booth like bones. "Do you know what it means? It is the seal of the voiceless, a covenant. Your silence is no longer a curse. It is an offering." The whispers surged through the wood, louder than ever. They pressed against me, filling my head with overlapping confessions, thousands of tongues writhing inside my skull. I fell to the floor, my hands over my ears, my body convulsing with the weight of them. Then his voice cut through the storm, sharp and final. "Your sins are not yours alone anymore. You carry them all, and your silence will keep them safe." When I stumbled out into the night, the world itself felt muted. No birds, no wind, only the echo of the seal pulsing on my throat. And in the corner of my vision, every shadow seemed to mouth the same word: mine. Episode 10. The Choir of the Damned. On the 10th night I heard singing. At first, I thought it was memory, a trick of the mind recalling Sunday mornings when the choir filled the rafters with praise. But no, this was real. The sound came drifting through my window, carried on a wind that seemed to know my name. I followed it back to the church. The doors yawned open without resistance. Inside, the nave was lit by dozens of candles, their flames bowing and trembling as though swayed by the music. And there they were, the choir, robed in shadow, lined in the loft above. Their voices rose and fell in perfect harmony, but something was wrong. The hymn was familiar, yet every note bent at the edges, warped into something unholy. A prayer turned inside out. And then I heard it, my own voice, woven into the song, clear, haunting, lifted higher than all the others. I froze, breathless, staring up at the dark silhouettes. My throat throbbed where the seal of silence burned. "Deliver us, O Lord!" It was me. I could not speak, yet there I was, singing words I did not choose. My voice soared through the arches, sweeter than I had ever sounded in life, yet carrying a sorrow that cut like glass. I tried to run, but the song held me still, my legs rooted to the floor, my chest heavy. Then I looked closer. The choir was not made of living voices. Their faces, pale in the candlelight, were slack, empty. Mouths hung open like broken hinges, yet the sound poured forth, flawless, unending. Some had no tongues, others had no throats. Still the hymn bled from them, stolen and eternal. And scattered among them, I recognized more. My sister's voice trembling in harmony with mine. A child's laugh twisted into melody. Whispers I had heard through the confessional, now singing as if they belonged to angels cast down. The priest's rasp rose beneath the choir, not sung but commanded. "Do you hear it, child? This is the music of salvation. Every voice you surrender becomes part of the eternal hymn. They cannot be silenced. They will sing until the end of time." I clawed at my throat, desperate to rip the sound away, to silence the song, but the seal pulsed harder, feeding my voice into the chorus. The loft shook with the force of it, dust falling like ash. And then the hymn ended. The candles went out. The choir stood still. But the silence that followed was worse than the song. For in that silence I realized the truth. My voice would never return to me. It belonged to the choir of the damned. Episode 11. The Priest's Secret. I thought I had seen the worst of him, the eyeless priest who breathed my sins, the shadow in the booth that devoured every word. But on the 11th night I learned what he truly was. The church was empty when I entered, though I no longer believed it could ever be truly empty. The walls listened, the rafters breathed. The pews leaned closer when I passed, as if to hear the silence branded on my throat. The confessional door was ajar, and for the first time I saw him step out. The priest moved slowly, hunched beneath robes that looked older than the stones themselves. His hands trembled, his skin as pale as wax. But it was his face that froze me in place. Where eyes should have been, mouths whispered, tiny shifting mouths, puckered and restless, muttering fragments of prayers and confessions in endless loops. Some begged for mercy, others laughed through bloodied teeth. He turned toward me, and the mouths opened wider, tasting the air as though they smelled my fear. "Do you see me, child?" His voice was layered, not one tone but many, as though each stolen voice lent him strength. "Do you finally understand?" I shook my head violently, but the mouths on his face moved in unison, hissing my name in voices I knew, my own, my sister's, and 100 strangers I'd never met. "I am the keeper," he rasped. "The confessions cannot be lost. Every sin must be spoken, every voice preserved. The silence you carry," his bony finger pointed to the burning seal on my throat, "is your covenant with me." I staggered back, my nails clawing the wood of the pew. My chest burned with the urge to scream, but nothing came. The priest stepped closer, and the mouths whispered faster, a tide of words pressing into my skull. The others were weak. They begged for absolution. "But you," his lips curled into something like a smile, "you endure silence. That makes you worthy." Worthy of what? The question screamed in my mind, but my body refused to move. The priest reached into his robe and pulled out a book. Its pages were thick, uneven, made of something too raw to be paper. He opened it, and I saw line after line written in blood-red ink, voices etched into parchment that breathed. And there, near the bottom of a page still wet, was my name. "You are already written," the priest whispered. "Every confession you deny will still find its way here. Every word you refuse will still be spoken through me. You are mine until the last page is filled." The mouths on his face quivered, and for one sickening moment I thought I saw my own lips among them, whispering prayers I had never prayed. The priest closed this book with a snap. The sound echoed like a coffin sealed. "Bring me another voice," he commanded, "and perhaps I will give you yours back." And I understood with a dread that hollowed me to the core. He wasn't just keeping sins. He was keeping us. Episode 12, The Book of Voiceless Sins. The 12th night did not begin in sleep. It began with the sound of pages turning. I woke to find the book resting on my chest, heavy, breathing. Its cover was not leather but skin, stretched and pale, marbled with veins that pulsed faintly as if still alive. My name glowed faintly on the front, written in the same blood-red ink I had seen in the priest's hands. I should have thrown it into the fire, but even the thought made my throat tighten, the seal burning like a brand. The book wanted to be opened, and I wanted to know. The first page writhed under my touch, the letters shifting as though ashamed of being read. Line after line, voices bled through, murmuring their own sins as the words rearranged themselves. I prayed for my mother's death. I drowned the kittens in the river. I took the Eucharist and spat it in the dirt. Each confession whispered into the air as I read, like the words themselves were alive, demanding to be heard. The more I turned, the louder they became until the room swelled with voices, pleading, laughing, cursing. Then I reached a page that stopped me cold. My name, again. But this time, not written once. It sprawled across the parchment in lines, over and over, as if I had confessed hundreds of times. Every sin tied to me, every crime I had never committed. I slit her throat while she prayed. I watched him drown and felt joy. I buried her alive and listened to her beg. No, these weren't mine. They couldn't be mine. But the book didn't care. My voice read them aloud against my will, spilling from the pages into the air, circling the room like vultures. And then the book shuddered. A new line appeared, fresh, bleeding into the parchment before my eyes. I watched, frozen, as the letters formed slowly, deliberately, as though written by an invisible hand. I will bring him another. The words pulsed. The seal on my throat burned hotter, binding me to them. My body trembled. I hadn't thought that. I hadn't written that. Yet there it was, already carved into eternity. From the darkness, the priest's rasp slithered into the room, though I could not see him. The book does not lie, child. It writes what is true, even what you have yet to accept. The pages fluttered violently, voices screaming louder, until the windows shook and the candlelight bent backward. My name repeated, multiplied, filling every line until there was no room left on the page. And then the book snapped shut. The silence that followed was worse than the noise, for in that silence I understood. The book was not recording my sins. It was deciding them. Episode 13, The Confession That Wasn't Mine. By the 13th night, I no longer trusted time. Sleep and waking blurred together, as though the world outside the church had grown tired of me. The only rhythm I knew was the pulse of the seal on my throat, binding me tighter with each beat. I should have burned the book, buried it, cast it into the river. But the moment I thought of doing so, the pages stirred like restless wings, and my body froze, paralyzed by a will that wasn't my own. That was when it began. The whispers returned, low at first, then rising, my voice spilling from the shadows. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I clutched my head, shaking violently. No, not again. But the words tumbled on, smooth and deliberate, as though I had rehearsed them for years. Tonight I will kill her. My blood turned to ice. I will follow her from the chapel. I will cut her throat when the bell strikes 9. No. The words were not mine. They belonged to something else. Yet hearing them in my own tone made my stomach lurch. The book opened on its own, pages fluttering until they stilled, wet ink bleeding across parchment to match what the voice had spoken. The confession wasn't of the past. It was prophecy. I stumbled to the door, desperate to escape, but the church groaned shut, its stone walls pressing closer, trapping me in its lungs. The whispers grew louder, describing each detail with cruel precision. The victim's face, the knife, the blood. And then I saw her. Through the lattice of the booth, a figure emerged in the pews. A woman, kneeling in prayer, her head bowed. I didn't know her, but my heart seized. She was the one, the victim the booth had chosen. My body trembled, my hands itched, aching for a weapon I did not carry. The seal burned hotter, branding me with a hunger that wasn't mine. I fell to my knees, gasping soundlessly, my lips shaping words I never wanted to say. I am ready, Father. The priest's rasp slithered from the darkness. Good. Every sin needs a tongue. Every prophecy needs a hand. The woman's head lifted, For a moment, her eyes locked with mine, wide with some quiet recognition. And in that instant, I realized the horror. She could hear my voice, not the silence I carried, but the confession being forced from me. Her face paled, her lips parted in a silent plea, and I understood. If I did nothing, the prophecy would claim me. If I resisted, the book would still write it true. Either way, the confession was no longer a warning. It was a sentence. Episode 14, The Bargain with Silence. The 14th night began with a choice. The book lay open on the altar, pages breathing like the chest of something half alive. My name sprawled across the parchment, dripping with fresh ink that never dried. Each line was another sin, some mine, most not. And at the bottom, scrawled in strokes that seemed to bleed into my skin, were the words, "Choose or be chosen." The priest stood beside it, robes whispering against the stone. His eyeless sockets, mouth still muttering ceaselessly, turned toward me. He didn't speak with his lips this time. His voice came from inside my head, threading through my silence like a knife through cloth. "Your voice can return, child. You need only give me another. One who will kneel where you knelt. One who will whisper secrets until their throat is hollow." I shook my head violently. No, I wouldn't damn another soul. I pressed my palms to my throat, begging silently for mercy. The mouths across his face widened, hissing with laughter. "Then keep your silence. Carry every sin. Let the choir sing with your stolen tongue until the end of days." The book's pages turned on their own, revealing a blank sheet. The priest's finger hovered over it like a pen, waiting. "Bring me a name." My chest heaved. I thought of strangers, of enemies, of the woman I had seen praying, destined for death in the confession I had never made. Could I? If I named her, would my voice return? Would the seal fade? I clenched my teeth, tears burning my eyes. No sound came, only the furious pounding of my silence. The priest leaned closer, his rasp hot against my skin. "You misunderstand. You need not kill them. You need only open the door. The booth will do the rest." I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. The offer was clear: betray another, or remain voiceless, consumed. The book pulsed. The blank page quivered. And then, horrifyingly, letters began to form on their own. My hand wasn't moving, yet the ink flowed as though dragged by my will. A name I had buried deep, a name I had loved once. My sisters. I screamed silently, clawing at the page. But the letters only grew bolder, darker, until they carved themselves into the parchment. The priest's mouths trembled in delight, singing fragments of her prayers in mocking tones. "The booth already knows," he whispered. "The choice is only whether you admit it." I fell to my knees, sobbing soundlessly, trapped between two dooms, my silence or hers, my damnation or her voice devoured. And in the hollow quiet that followed, I realized the truth. The bargain had never been mine to make. The book had already decided. All that remained was to play my part. Episode 15, The Final Confession. The 15th night felt like the end. The seal on my throat burned hotter than fire, pulsing in rhythm with the church bells that tolled midnight. I knew before stepping inside that this was the last time. The church wanted me back. The booth wanted me back, and I had nowhere else to go. The nave was waiting, every candle lit, every pew filled with shadows that looked almost human. The choir of the damned stirred above, their mouths slack, their stolen voices humming like bees in a hive. The book lay open on the altar, glowing faintly, its pages full. No blank space remained. The priest stood beside it, taller than I remembered, his eyeless sockets swollen with whispering mouths. He raised his trembling hands. "It is time, child. The final confession. The last word you will never speak." My body moved without me, guided by the seal's command. I stumbled toward the booth, every step heavier, as if I were walking into my own grave. The door closed behind me with a sigh, sealing me inside the darkness I once thought holy. The lattice glowed faintly, and for a moment I saw my reflection staring back, not in glass, but in the priest's hollow face. My lips moved on his skin. My eyes blinked where his should have been. The voices began. My voice. My sisters. The child's. The countless others. All of them poured through the wood, rising, overlapping, until the booth shook violently. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." It repeated over and over, a storm of confessions that bled into one, until the words twisted into a single, unified voice. Mine. And then silence. The priest leaned close, his breath rattling through 100 stolen throats. "Do you see now? You were never meant to be forgiven. You were meant to replace me." The booth convulsed, wood cracking, the lattice splitting open. From the shadows, arms clawed at me, mouths pressing against my skin, breathing my sins back into me. The seal on my throat split open like a wound, bleeding light that seared the dark. I screamed, soundless, until at last, sound returned. My voice tore free, raw and ragged, echoing through the church. But it wasn't my prayer, it wasn't my confession, it was the priest's. "Forgive me, Father, for I am finished." The mouths on his face fell silent. His body crumbled, robes collapsing into dust. And in the hollow where he had stood, I saw the truth. The booth had never kept him alive. The booth had been waiting for me. The lattice closed around me like ribs, sealing me inside. My throat burned, then went cold. My voice rose again, filling the nave, leading the choir of the damned in their eternal hymn. And I understood with a final shattering clarity. I was not free. I was the new keeper. The confessional had its priest again, and the world outside would never hear my voice.
Epilogue. If you've heard my story, then it's already too late. The confessional does not rest. It waits, patient and hungry, in every church where shadows linger longer than they should. You think you step inside to unburden yourself, but you are only feeding it. Every whispered lie, every hidden desire, every sin you never meant to say aloud, it takes them, keeps them, twists them. And when your voice falters, when your throat aches, when you dream of mouths whispering in the dark, you will know it has found you. I sit here now, cloaked in robes that are not mine, my throat sealed by silence, my lips moving only when the booth commands. People come to me still, kneeling, trembling, believing they will be forgiven. They do not see the mouths where my eyes once were. They do not hear the choir waiting above. They only hear my voice. And when they leave, they take nothing with them. The sin remains. The silence spreads. And the next time you kneel in the darkness, remember my warning. When the priest tells you to speak, when the booth urges you to confess, do not answer. Because once your voice enters, it will never belong to you again. It will belong to me.